Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi at-tayyibin wat-tahirin. Assalamu alaikum, my dearest brothers and sisters, and welcome to this episode of Shan Ramadan with me, Dr. Mehwish Qureshi. I testify that no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah, and I testify Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the messenger of Allah. Now, in the previous episode, I started talking about zakah, and we talked about on what things zakah is due and how much zakah is due. Okay, now I'm going to review a few points and then we will continue inshallah. So we mentioned zakah is due if one owns the quantum or the value of the quantum, that is the monetary value, or the amount of it in animals or other than that. This is in excess of one's debt, clothing, residence, furniture, horse, weapon, slave that is kept for service, and the basic needs of one's dependents. And it's an obligation to have the appropriate intention when setting aside the amount to be paid, or to have this intention at the same time as paying the deserving person. Now, it is makruh tanzihi to send zakah from one country to another unless one carries it to one's deserving, needy relatives or to a group of people who need it more than one's fellow countrymen. It is permissible, in other words, it would be considered as having fulfilled the obligation to pay the monetary equivalent of the due zakah. And this is contrary to the madhab of Imam Shafi'i, may Allah have mercy upon him. And it is an obligation in the types of zakah, as I said, to have the appropriate intention when setting aside the amount to be paid, or when you're giving this money. So you need, remember we said the intention is a firm feeling in the heart. So when you're putting the money of zakah to a side, have this intention, have the correct intention that you're doing it, it's for zakah. Or when you're giving this money, that you're giving it with the intention of zakah. Now, zakah is paid to those who exist among the 8 categories. And these 8 categories were mentioned in the Quran in the verse of As-Sadaqat, Surah At-Tawbah, Surah 9, Ayah 60. إن الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل فريضة من الله, which means zakah must be exclusively paid to the fuqara, مساكين, عاملين عليها, مؤلفة قلوبهم, رقاب, غارمين, في سبيل الله, and ibn sabil. This is an obligation from Allah. So I'm going to talk about each of these categories now. So zakah can be paid to al-fuqara, which is the plural of faqir. And this is the one who has the minimum amount of something or something little which is less than the quantum. Al-masakin, which is the plural of miskin, it refers to the one who has nothing and thus needs to ask others so as to get what would provide nourishment and cover the body. Al-amiluna alayha, the zakah workers, such as those who collect the zakah payments and those who gather the zakah or gather those who deserve to be given the zakah money. The zakah worker is given an amount from the zakah monies that will suffice for his helpers and his dependents for the duration of his departure and return, even if he was wealthy. Now, an exclusion from the 8 is al-mu'allafatu qulubuhum, which are the new Muslim converts whose hearts need to be reconciled. Now, this was excluded from the 8 categories since this group of people are said to no longer exist, just as it was mentioned by our master Umar radiyallahu anhu that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to give such people zakah monies to facilitate their integration into the Muslim community. As for nowadays, Allah has strengthened the Muslims, and this Umar radiyallahu anhu did not give the new converts a portion from the zakah monies due to the absence of the reason for which they were given it in the past. Ar-riqab, which is plural of raqabah, literally it means neck. What is meant by it is the mukatab. This is the slave who has a contract with his master, allowing him to earn his freedom by paying him installments of money gained through trade that the master permitted the slave to pursue. Such a slave would be helped with the money of zakah so as to gain his freedom. Al-Gharimin is another group of whom zakah can be given to. They are the ones who are in debt and do not own a quantum in excess of their debt. And fi sabilillah, who are the poor volunteer soldiers, as was explained by Abu Yusuf and others. And it doesn't refer to every charitable act as was wrongly claimed by Al-Kasani. Ibn Sabil, this is the traveller that does not have what suffices him to reach his destination, whether he was in his hometown or elsewhere. Such a person would take an amount from the money of zakah that would suffice his need. It is not permissible, nor is it religiously valid to pay zakah to other than the aforementioned types, such as giving zakah to build a mosque, a school, a cemetery wall, or the like. It's invalid due to the lack of transfer of ownership of the wealth to one of the aforementioned types. So when I said it's not valid, if a person over the years gave their zakah to build a mosque, it's like as if they never paid zakah. So they need to pay all that zakah again, but to those who are deserving of zakah. So you can't give your zakah to family members back home, as you can see, if they do not fulfill the criteria of being a fakir or a miskeen. If they do, then of course you can, but you need to look into their situation. Just because they ring you and say, we're poor, can we have your zakah money? You need to look into their situation. Do they actually really fulfill the criteria of being a fakir or a miskeen? Now, Ibn Hibban narrated in his Sahih that the Prophet ﷺ said, رُبَّ قَائِمٍ حَظُّهُ مِنْ قِيَامِهِ السَّهْرِ وَرُبَّ صَائِمٍ حَظُّهُ مِنْ صِيَامِهِ الْجُوعِ. This means one might find a person who stays up praying at night but only gains tiredness from their prayer. And one might find a fasting person who only gains hunger from their fast. One of the reasons that a person only gains tiredness and hunger from their acts of worship is because they did not learn the religious knowledge, and thus they performed invalid prayers and invalid fasts. Hence, this hadith emphasizes the importance of learning the personal obligatory knowledge of the religion. Because through this knowledge, and only through learning this knowledge, my dearest brothers and sisters, will one learn the obligatory matters and how to perform them in a valid manner. One would learn the details of zakah. What is zakah? What is it due on? How much is due? And when is it due? In an authentic hadith narrated by Al-Bayhaqi in Shu'ab al-Iman, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيضَةٌ عَلَى كُلِّ Muslim, which means seeking the religious knowledge is obligatory upon every Muslim, whether male or female. This means that there is a minimum amount of religious knowledge that every Muslim male and female needs to learn, so as to be safe on the Day of Judgment. Now, by learning the personal obligatory knowledge of the religion, one is able to discriminate between what is lawful halal and what is unlawful haram, and what is valid and what is invalid. So the personal obligatory knowledge is not just for a certain group of people. All of us are in need of this knowledge. Why? So as to be obedient slaves of Allah, who fulfill the obligations and avoid the sins. Whether a person is a doctor, a nurse, a school teacher, a shopkeeper, or other than that, one needs to learn the personal obligatory knowledge of the religion so as to be safe in the hereafter. If someone does not learn, how would they even know what is an obligation so as to do it? If someone does not learn, how would they know what are the sins so as to avoid them? Sadly, in the times that we're living in, many people don't learn how to pray, how to fast, who to give zakah to, when to give zakah, on what things is zakah due. Subhanallah. Thereafter, when learning the personal obligatory knowledge, one starts with the most important matter, which is the basics of belief and how to protect it. Then after this, a person learns how to purify and pray, as well as all other matters such as fasting, zakah and hajj. A person learns about matters such as buying and selling, renting and hiring, marriage and divorce, followed by the obligations of the heart and the sins of the body parts. And my dearest brothers and sisters, in the series known as Pillars of Islam, I cover this knowledge, and this is available on the YouTube Iqra channel. So do log in, do listen to this knowledge, do listen to these lessons if you have not learnt this personal obligatory knowledge. And remember, the word obligatory, what does it mean? It means you don't have a choice in the matter. You have to do it. And you would be sinful for not learning this knowledge. So the series is Pillars of Islam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made this earthly life as an abode of passage, and the afterlife the abode of settlement. In Surah Al-Duha, verse 4, it means, and indeed the afterlife is better for you than the first. Also in the Quran, in verse 16 and 17 of Surah Al-A'la, in Surah Al-A'la, it means rather you prefer the earthly life while the afterlife is better and longer lasting. May Allah raise the rank of the one who is the most detached of the worldly life and most desirous of Allah's reward. And may Allah protect the nation of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who said to Umar radiallahu anhu, he said to him, do you not accept that they have the earthly life, the dunya, and we have the afterlife, the akhirah? Subhanallah. Do you not accept that they have this life, this earthly life, and we have the afterlife, the hereafter? Let it be known that the honor in this life and the happiness of the hereafter is by obeying Allah. Among the habit of the obedient ones is that they rush to perform the obedience, so they seize the hours of their lives to take from it provisions for their hereafter, because they know that the earthly life is the planting ground for the hereafter. Just as the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in a hadith narrated by At-Tabarani. Thus, the person should not suffice. We shouldn't be sufficed with what we have of our good deeds. Rather, we ought to increase our good deeds and exert effort into doing that. Whoever plants good here, he will reap it in the hereafter. Because the case of the human in this life is like the one who is planting crops so that he can get the harvest of those crops. Likewise, this earthly life, it is the abode of work, not the abode of recompense, because the person works in it for the sake of what he will find in the hereafter. Allah Ta'ala revealed in the Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullah wal tanzur nafsum ma qaddamat lighad, which means, it's verse 18 of Surah Al-Hashr, it means, and let every soul look into what it has prepared for the day of judgment. And let every soul look into what it has prepared for the day of judgment. Ask yourselves this. What have you prepared for that day? That day that we cannot deny. That day that is a certainty. In this verse, we are encouraged. The believers are encouraged to think about the matters of the hereafter. Its meaning is, let every person look into what good deeds he has prepared and advance towards his afterlife, towards his hereafter. What benefits us in the hereafter is the best provision, piety. Allah Ta'ala revealed in the Quran in verse 197 of Surah Al-Baqarah, which means, take provisions for your journey towards the afterlife, for surely the best of provisions is piety. Subhanallah. My dearest brothers and sisters, we know with each breath we are getting closer and closer to our death. Let us finish with this last verse of the Quran, which was ayah 281 of Surah Al-Baqarah. وَاتَّقُوا يَوْمًا تُرْجَعُونَ فِيهِ إِلَى اللَّهِ ثُمَّ تُوَفَّى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ مَا كَسَبَتْ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. And fear the day that you will be resurrected. Then each person will get the deeds of that which they acquired, and none shall be dealt with unjustly. So let us put effort in trying to acquire paradise, which is much better than anything in this dunya. Just as the Prophet ﷺ said, in paradise there is that which no eye ever saw, no ear ever heard, and no heart ever imagined. May Allah enable us to die as Muslims and bless us with a place in the highest gardens of paradise without any previous torture, and Allah knows best. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.